Somewhere along Peach Leaf Alley, there was a kindly and amiable old man sitting in a cane chair under the corridor of his residence. Beside him was a clever-looking and adorable maidservant in a jade-colored dress and long yellow-patterned pants. She slowly waved a fan as she listened to the old man telling his stories. The old man suddenly asked, "Taoya, where's the wind? Are you nodding off again? I'm not trying to frighten you, but if you slack off in the large clans outside this small town, you'll definitely receive punishment." There was no response. The old man, who was always lenient and kind toward his servants, was just about to tease her again when his expression suddenly changed. He looked up toward the distance, with his expression becoming solemn. As it turned out, it wasn't only the maidservant in the courtyard and her fan which had become still. Instead, even the formless wind had become still. The old man hurriedly held his breath and concentrated his attention, silently reciting a mantra and entering a state of meditation. This was to prevent his cultivation from flowing away in this temporary countercurrent in the long river of time. The old man heaved a soft sigh. Even Qi Jingchun, the person who most respected the rules and etiquette, had finally broken the rules and become involved. It was clear that a storm was brewing. Near the Iron Lock Well, a sturdily built young man from outside of town was squatting down and staring intently at the spinning spindle of the well. However, out of the corner of his eyes, he was secretly stealing glances at the side figure of a shapely village woman. She was currently bent over and hoisting a bucket of water from the well, perfectly showing off her voluptuous behind and her weighty breasts. Her curves seemed slightly exaggerated, and her shapely figure was exposed for all to see. Her movements more so highlighted her slightly unruly nature that was just like the swaying plump ear of wheat. This caused the woman, who only had a middling appearance, to radiate with a different kind of charm. When the young man finally noticed the eerie silence and stillness in the surroundings, he didn't choose to move either. Instead, he summoned his courage and stared straight at the wonderful figure of the woman at the well. The young man silently gulped. He then hurriedly shifted his body to squat in a different stance. No wonder his master had told him that women in the outside world were all tigers out of the jungle, with their power greatly reduced. However, once they were brought into the mountains and into the jungles, they would once again become powerful and domineering tigers. They would even eat people alive. When his master became drunk, he would always say that all of the heroes and talented people in the world would eventually succumb to the tiger in their own backyard. There wouldn't be a single exception. However, the young man felt like tigers out of the jungle were already extremely powerful. Take, for example, the woman before him. Her looks were clearly ordinary, yet her shapely and seductive figure caused his heart to itch. If she suddenly slapped him without a word and without reason, the young man felt like he wouldn't dare to strike back at all. In fact, if the woman then smiled at him, he might even smile back. The young man couldn't help but feel slightly disheartened and discouraged. He glanced down at his crotch and scolded, "How pathetic, as expected of something without a spine." In Clay Vase Alley, Song Jiksen was currently flipping through a thick and ancient local county chronicle. He was able to discover many patterns, such as how this book was approximately appended to and edited once every 60 years. Thus, Song Jiksen privately referred to this book as the 60-year chronicle. Something else he noticed was that those who were brought out of the small town by distant relatives at a young age would almost never return. It was as if they didn't like returning to their hometown. They were like flowers that bloomed inside the town, yet whose fragrance could only be enjoyed outside. Indeed, it was in this manner that many clans and families took root and grew in the outside world. In fact, some of them even grew into towering trees with deep and sturdy roots. Thus, Song Jiksen also nicknamed this book Beyond the Wall. Right now, the young boy was on a page with someone's biography. This was a description of someone called Kaozai's life. Few words were used to describe him. This was another distinguishing feature of the local county chronicle. Song Jiksen had read this book at least 7 or 8 times, so he was naturally extremely familiar with its contents already. Thus, when he flipped through it again like he was now, he would only choose the most bizarre and interesting stories to read. He would treat these stories as legends shared by storytellers, with their authenticity unable to be verified. Of course, Song Jiksen didn't care much for this either. He only remembered the events that had occurred late that one night, when that man in his official garb was about to return to the capital to report on his work. He had come to speak with Song Jiksen in an extremely solemn manner. He had told the young boy to keep one thing firmly in mind. That was, he needed to memorize every single person who had appeared in the local county chronicle. In addition to this, he needed to remember the roots of these hundreds of thousands of people and their ancestors, especially those who were related to the 4 surnames and 10 clans. Song Jiksen was unmoving at this moment, much like those broken clay statues of gods in the southeast of the small town. These were statues carelessly left lying on their sides in the grass and in the dirt. No matter if they were subject to the wind or the rain, they would remain still and unmoving. At this moment, even the rays of light that were shining in from the window and sprawled across the study table were locked in an abnormal state of stillness. In this residence, there was only one person and one matter that could still move: Jai Gui and the inconspicuous 4-legged snake. She had noticed the abnormal situation very early on, and the first thought that had occurred to her was to go next door to look for that expressionless young girl and give her a hearty scolding. However, after noticing the existence of that sword, the maidservant gave up on this enticing thought. She first walked into her young master's room and shot a sideways glance at the contents of the book that he was reading. She was immediately annoyed upon seeing the words Kaozai, so she helped her young master flip a few pages forward. Only after seeing a paragraph about Zai did she smile in happiness. However, she quickly flipped the book back to its initial page in a begrudging and resentful manner. This was to prevent any heavenly secrets from being revealed, and also to prevent her own secrets from being exposed. During these past years, the intelligent young master had only been suspicious of her background out of curiosity. However, he had never found any solid proof or evidence. With her grand scheme almost about to succeed, she certainly didn't want to lose everything at the final step. She often followed the young master to his private school, and there were some sayings of the scholars that she felt were extremely pretentious and disgraceful. For example, one should sacrifice their life in pursuit of righteousness. However, there were also some sayings that she found quite acceptable. For example, in a journey of 100 steps, 90 steps is only the halfway mark. This was truly a comprehensive and easily understandable principle. Meanwhile, the earthen yellow 4-legged snake was lying on the doorstep and sun-basking. With the surroundings silent and still, the 4-legged snake also recovered its true body. Under the radiant illumination of the sun, it appeared dazzling and colorful, and it appeared smooth and crystal-like. Its body was like a piece of colored glaze. In the neighboring house, Enning Yao had also entered an extremely mysterious state of fetal breathing. She didn't breathe using her mouth or nose, but was instead breathing like an infant still in their mother's womb. Her divine breath returned to its roots, while her thoughts were also paused. Inside the snow-white scabbard, the flying sword felt as if it had been granted freedom. After slowly leaving its scabbard, it gracefully flew around its owner in a light and loving manner, appearing as gentle and caring as could be. At the same time, its movements were also as beautiful as the soft fluttering of a young girl's dress. The sword wasn't flying around in a random manner, and it was instead flying around as if it were a magical horn painting a powerful symbol. It was creating the most optimal atmosphere and feng shui for its owner to recuperate in. Sure enough, the surrounding essence suddenly rushed into the young girl who wasn't breathing at this moment. Like a whale swallowing water, she voraciously feasted on the origin spiritual energy of this heaven and earth. It was also at this moment that the small town's deathly silence and stillness became a stark juxtaposition to the lively nature of this residence. On some creekside to the south of the small town, there stood a short man with thick brows and large eyes. His intense aura was imposing, and his upper body was exposed as he swung the blacksmith hammer in his hand. As the hammer landed, sparks flew into the surroundings, illuminating the entire room. Countless bright and flashing sparks chaotically shot around the spacious room, appearing dazzling and spectacular. Each blow from his hammer would unleash a different spectacle. Opposite the man was a young girl who had a clean and tidy ponytail. She was small and petite, and she was currently wearing an apron made from cowhide to prevent the sparks from striking her body. Under that, she was wearing ordinary cotton clothes. These were clothes that would be easily burned by the sparks. When the hammer fell again, tens of millions of sparks abruptly froze in midair, lingering all over the room. The young girl with a ponytail frowned and asked, "Dad?" The man replied in a serious tone, "Let's swap and have you forge the sword instead. We can take advantage of this opportunity to temper your mind and heart." The young girl placed down the old sword billet before sweeping away the sparks before her. The sparks were easily swept aside, and the movement of a few instantly triggered the movement of them all. The sparks that should have been frozen in time started to chaotically clash and glow, with their innumerable collisions causing the brightness in the room to fluctuate without any pattern. Compared to the elderly seniors in the small town that were like dragons hiding in a deep pool, with their breathing paused and their attention focused, the young girl's movements truly appeared overly wild and domineering. This was especially the case after she started to swing the hammer. Her movements were large and powerful, and her strikes were more so quick and ferocious. In fact, she appeared even wilder and more unrestrained than the experienced man. Sparks would spray into the surroundings with each hammer strike, yet none of them would vanish thanks to the still and unmoving time. Strike after strike, the room was eventually filled with dense layers of sparks that were as glistening as the myriad stars in the night sky. The swordsmithing room was filled with countless radiant sparks. The man stared intently at the glowing red sword billet as he instructed in a deep voice, "Silently recite the dragon-shaking chapter of the swordsmithing scripture in your mind." The young girl's intensity suddenly dropped by a drastic amount, and she silently called, "Dad." "What?" the man asked in annoyance. The young girl's intensity fell even further as she said timidly, "I ate too little for lunch. I'm a bit hungry now, so I don't have the energy to swing the hammer anymore." The man became even angrier. If they weren't forging a sword, he would have almost started to scold her. "I'm only telling you to recite a scripture, yet you're acting as if I'm asking for your life. What kind of excuse is this? Bloody hell, my darling daughter with your appetite. Being hungry is indeed very normal. This really wasn't an excuse." The young girl secretly laughed. Even though she said she was hungry, her swinging never in fact weakened. At this moment the girl suddenly roared, slamming the hammer down with her full strength. At the same time she shouted, "Come out." An especially large number of sparks shot into the air this time, with their radiance also being especially blinding. The man maintained his composed expression, but he said in his mind, "Success." In the courtyard of Gu Kan's house, the woman slowly regained consciousness, though her head still hurt like it was about to split apart. She sat back on the bench with the help of her child. The river-severing true Lord Liu Jimao was still resting with his eyes closed, but his thumb and index finger were slowly moving under his sleeves as if he were calculating something. The woman grabbed her son to sit down next to her before asking quietly, "Immortal elder, what's going on?" The old man didn't open his eyes as he replied, "You have a good son, and I found myself a good disciple. Mrs. Gu, you can patiently wait to gain honor and renown thanks to your son." The woman was delighted, so much so that tears of joy brimmed in her eyes as she embraced her child, murmuring, "My child's dad, did you hear that? Our Gu Kan will definitely achieve great things." A surprised expression suddenly appeared on Liu Jimao's face, and he opened his eyes to look down at the patterns on his palm. It was as if a new road had appeared, and he said to himself, "Why is this? It shouldn't be." The young boy didn't die, and it was instead that immortal disciple who mysteriously died. The old man couldn't help but stand up and slowly pace around the courtyard. His fingers moved extremely quickly as he calculated something, and he eventually exclaimed, "Trash! You actually died at the hands of a poor young boy. The reputation that Dawn Cloud Mountain has worked so hard to build for the past 1,000 years has been destroyed just like that." Guken's mother was extremely uneasy and nervous as she asked, "Immortal Elder, since Canner has already become your disciple, why don't we let Chen Ping'an off the hook?" "Such foolish benevolence. If you were truly kind-hearted, you wouldn't have developed that killing intent when we first met. Yet, you're pretending to be a benevolent saint now. How shameless." Upon hearing the old man's scolding, the woman became as pale as a sheet, not daring to utter a single word. However, the old man still felt angry, so he pointed at the woman and scolded, "Short-sighted village woman. When Guken returns to Lake Shujian with me, the two of you definitely can't see each other too often, lest his cultivation be affected by you. Do you have any complaints?" The woman hurriedly waved her hands, saying, "I wouldn't dare." There was a cold and menacing glint in the old man's eyes. The woman faltered for a brief moment before quickly coming to her senses. She wore a dejected expression as she pitifully added, "I don't have any complaints. I definitely don't have any complaints." The old man forcefully flicked his sleeve, saying with a humph, "How infuriating." Seeing that the woman was still relatively charming, he had initially wanted to take her in as a personal maidservant. However, just as he had developed this thought, she had immediately acted in such a vulgar and intolerable manner. She truly deserved to lose the opportunity to set foot on the path of cultivation. At this moment, the old man suddenly tensed as if he were facing a powerful enemy. He looked around, and sure enough, this land had been drawn into a halted realm by someone. Halted realms were one of the many mystical realms in this world, and this was a realm that even terrestrial gods and golden arhats couldn't dream of creating. This was a grand mystical power of the loftiest heights. Even though this was largely thanks to that large formation, it was still something that elicited a deep sense of respect and fear. Just think about it. Regardless of whether one was an immortal, Buddha, deity, demon, or ghost, they would be forced to kowtow toward that person as long as they were trapped in this realm. Just what kind of experience was this? The river-severing true Lord Liu Jimao dreamed of reaching such paramount heights, not using one's most powerful trump card. Get absolutely fucked. If Liu Jimao possessed such a mystical realm, he would immediately drag the third-generation disciples of Buddha, the Tao Patriarch, and the Confucian hierarch inside. He didn't dare to say that he could force them to bow their heads, but they could all at the very least be on an equal standing. Without any warning at all, Liu Jimao suddenly spat a mouthful of blood. At the same time, blood also shot from his hand. It was as if someone had slashed his hand with a sharp blade. His white bowl also involuntarily appeared in his other hand, with disorderly ripples bouncing across the surface of the water and black lines, chaotically colliding against the sides of the bowl. The old man didn't hesitate for a second as he clasped the palm of one hand against the back of the other. Even though he was a Taoist of an unorthodox sect, he bowed in the manner of a Confucian disciple at this moment. He bowed as deeply as he could, with his voice quivering as he said in the most sincere manner, "Liu Jimao, the island master of Lake Shujian's Cyan Gorge Island, earnestly asks Mr. Qi to have mercy on this junior's pursuit of Tao. If I've offended Mr. Qi, Sage Qi, please don't hold a grudge against this lowly person." After a long while, he finally received a reply. "Make haste and leave." These 4 words were like thunder, as they exploded in the true Lord's ears. Liu Jimao was overjoyed as he said, "Rest assured, Mr. Qi, I'll immediately leave this town with Gu Kan and his mother." The old man, who was referring to himself as a junior, suddenly remembered something, and he carefully asked, "Dare I ask, Mr. Chi, how should this junior deal with the 2 bags of gold essence copper coins?" The mighty voice sounded once again, saying, "One person and one item makes exactly 2 faded opportunities. Just leave them in the courtyard. For the next 30 years, you're also prohibited from taking a single step outside Lake Shujian." Liu Jimao felt as if a huge weight had been taken off his shoulder. Thus, he didn't try to act obsequiously and perform a Confucian bow this time, instead performing a dignified Taoist bow. "I wouldn't dare to refuse senior's bestowal. This junior will definitely remember Mr. Chi's benevolence for as long as I live." Qi Jingchun's voice didn't sound again. The halted realm also vanished soon after. Liu Jimao didn't speak another word of nonsense, immediately ordering the woman and Gu Kan to leave the small town with him. The woman was just about to speak, yet she immediately swallowed her words in fear upon seeing Liu Jimao's viciously ferocious glare. Liu Jimao retrieved 2 bags of coins. Even though this person who was intent on becoming a genuine true lord was extremely reluctant, he still placed the 2 bags of coins on the long bench without any hesitation at all. However, just as they were about to leave, Liu Jimao suddenly asked, "Do you still have any other antiques in your house?" The woman wore a blank expression, yet the mischievous Gu Kan immediately reminded her, "Didn't Dad leave a myriad treasure pagoda? The one collecting dust under the bed?" Liu Jimao's eyes lit up, and he immediately ordered the woman to lead him over to investigate. Since the sage approved of the fact that Gu Kan himself was a faded opportunity, this also implied that the child could bring away the faded opportunities that belonged to him. As for the eventual owner of these faded opportunities, if one were in the small town, one would most likely have to listen to Qi Jingchun, even if the heavens came over. Once he returned to Lake Shujian, however, it would be a completely different story. With the 2 people entering the house, there was finally no one to look after Gu Kan. Grabbing a bag of coins in each hand, he quietly opened the door before sprinting down to the other end of the clay vase alley. Inside the house, the woman was kneeling on the floor and dragging the box out from under the bed. The box wasn't large, yet it was extremely heavy. Thus, it was hard work to pull out, and the woman couldn't help but pant in exertion. Yet it was also at this moment that her shapely behind was kicked by the river-severing true lord. The old man jeered, "Mrs. Gu, what you're lacking is some nurturing and care. However, with just this alone, it might be a bit difficult for you to become a second-tier maidservant on the Cyan Gorge Island. However, it's more than enough for you to become a third-tier maidservant. You're a bit beneath me, but there are indeed a few guests and cultivators on the island, and you might just suit their tastes. At that time, you can put in some effort and fight for some opportunities. Don't be shy and let your good fortune slip away." The woman's body involuntarily became a bit stiff. However, more than half of her body was still under the bed, hiding her expression. After arriving at some alley, Qi Jingchun said to Chen Ping'an, "Leave Kai Jinjian and Fu Nanhua to me to deal with. Now that you have this locust leaf with ancestral blessings, you more so can't show disregard for your own safety and life. This is the best way to repay your parents' love. As for Dawn Cloud Mountain, Old Dragon City, and the river-severing True Lord, I don't dare to guarantee that they'll never seek you out to cause trouble. However, they definitely won't cause you any trouble in the next 10 years. If you're lucky, you might remain a commoner forever, and you might be able to enjoy 30 years of peace." Qi Jingchun smiled and continued, "There's no need to fear this small town either. In the future, after a while, there most likely won't be so much scheming and plotting anymore. If you want to live in peace for 20 or 30 years, why not consider getting married with a young lady here and starting a family? If you want to travel beyond this small town to witness the true scenery of the outside world, that would also be a very good choice." Reading 10,000 scrolls and walking 10,000 li is something that we scholars must do. In the future, you'll discover that in this small town, walking and traveling around is easy to do, while trying to read and study is difficult. In the outside world, however, many people find buying books, reading books, and collecting books is extremely easy. Yet, they truly detest traveling walking distances. They find it too tiring and difficult. Their so-called journeys with books on their back are nothing more than excursions in a comfortable carriage. The young boy was astonished. Mr. Chi, walking can be considered tiring and difficult. Chi Jingchun laughed heartily upon hearing this. To say nothing of the outside world, let's just have a look at your surroundings first. Have you seen children of your age from Fortune Street and Peach Leaf Alley running around the mountains? The young boy nodded in understanding. That's indeed the case. Chi Jingchun pondered for a moment before pulling out a green jade hairpin from his bun. He bent down and handed it to the poor young boy, saying, "Just treat this as a farewell gift. It isn't anything valuable, and it more so isn't an immortal treasure. So don't worry and accept it. In fact, I'm just like you. I used to be a poor village youth, yet I made a determined effort to study. After experiencing many hardships and challenges, and of course many kinds of opportunities as well, I was finally able to enter the Mountain Cliff Academy. Those days of becoming my teacher's disciple and studying were the happiest days of my life. After my teacher left the mountain, he handed this hairpin to me. This was something of an expectation and entrustment toward me. However, looking back after all these years, it's a pity that I've been unable to perform well this entire time. If my teacher were still alive, I'm sure that he would definitely be disappointed." Chen Ping'an didn't dare to accept this present. This jade hairpin seemingly represented the amiable master and disciple relationship between Mr. Qi and his teacher. Not only was this jade hairpin a representation of their deep relationship, it more so wasn't a small present either. Regardless of how unknowledgeable the young boy was, he was still at the very least someone who had fired imperial Chinaware. Thus, he was still able to appraise whether an item was valuable or not. Chi Jingchun said in a gentle voice, "If it's left with me, the final relic of my respected master will also be neglected and stifled. Thus, I'm better off giving it to you. Moreover, it's not as if you haven't earned this. I've stayed in this small town for almost 60 years, and there had always been a knot in my heart that I couldn't resolve. However, it's a shame that my respected master has already passed away, so I initially thought that I would never receive an answer to this question. In the end, it was you who unknowingly cleared up my confusion. Thus, it's only right that I give this jade hairpin to you. Chen Ping'an, I was only able to help you obtain a single locust leaf. There's nothing more I can do for you." Chen Ping'an accepted the jade hairpin with both hands. This was a jade hairpin made out of relatively ordinary material. He then looked up and said with sincerity, "Mr. Qi has already done a lot for me." Chi Jingchun simply replied with a smile. Seeing Chen Ping'an accept his jade hairpin, he also managed to do away with one more worry. This jade hairpin was indeed very ordinary. In the end, however, it was still something that had been left by his respected teacher. Thus, it was truly a wonderful thing that he was able to gift it to this young boy who definitely wouldn't bring shame to the words inscribed upon it. Chi Jingchun gave the young boy one final piece of advice, saying, "Chen Ping'an, remember this. Regardless of what you encounter in the future, you definitely can't lose hope in this world." Outside a house in Clay Vase Alley, there was an unruly child with 2 lines of snot trailing from his nose. He was viciously kicking the door at this moment, cursing as he did so. Saliva flew everywhere as he shouted, "Chen Ping'an, if you don't get the hell over here, I'm going to get someone to hack you to death and smash all of that worthless crap lying around in your house. What are you so busy with? Perhaps you're with Song Jixin's wife. You're doing the deed with her in broad daylight. Don't you know to look after Song Jixin's feelings? Very well, you're not going to come out, huh? Is that how it's going to be? Then I'm going to leave. I'm genuinely going to leave. Don't even think about seeing me ever again. I initially wanted to leave my treasures to you, but Chen Ping'an, hurry up and answer the door. For some reason, the little boy's voice eventually started to carry a hint of a sob. He sniffed loudly, causing the 2 lines of snot to shoot back into his nose. Gu Ken suddenly felt a dull pain on the back of his head. He hurriedly turned around, and after seeing that familiar face, he let loose again, shouting, "Chen Ping'an, you bloody little thing!" Judging from Chen Ping'an's expression, it was clear that he wasn't feeling too well. Gu Ken hurriedly changed his tune upon seeing this, asking, "Are you feeling all right?" His sudden change in tone was as smooth as hovering clouds and flowing water. It didn't appear jarring at all. Chen Ping'an was already used to this snotty little child's rude and mischievous behavior. Standing there with a new clay pot in his hands, Chen Ping'an huffed, "Can you not tell whether I'm feeling all right or not?" Realizing that he still had important matters to deal with, Gu Ken hurriedly dragged Chen Ping'an to the entrance of his courtyard. He then stuffed 2 exquisitely decorated pouches into Chen Ping'an's hands, lowering his voice and saying, "Remember the small loach you gave me last year?" Chen Ping'an was slightly baffled as he held the 2 weighty pouches. He was quite familiar with these pouches, as the brocade-robed boy had especially given a pouch of copper coins to him after forcefully buying that golden carp. Chen Ping'an looked around, and he saw that there was no one else on Clay Vase Alley. However, he still opened his door in a hurry, bringing Gu Ken into the courtyard. After putting the clay pot down, he directly asked, "An outsider wants to buy that catfish from you, is that correct, Gu Ken? I strongly suggest you not to sell it. Don't sell it even if they try to force you. Didn't you want to give your mother a good life in the future? If so, then you definitely have to keep that loach, understand?" Gu Ken suddenly burst into tears. He grabbed onto Chen Ping'an's sleeves and said through sobs, "I wanted to return the loach to you, but mother didn't let me. She even smacked my face. Ever since I was young, my mother has never hit me before. And that storyteller, I don't know if he's a god or a ghost, but he's extremely terrifying. He brought me into his white bowl, and after that, the loach suddenly became extremely big. In fact, it became even bigger than the water vat in my house." Chen Ping'an held his hand over the little boy's mouth, his expression extremely serious as he shot a glare and said, "Since I gave the loach to you, the loach is now yours. Do you still want to give your mother a good life in the future? Do you want her to be able to eat meat every day and use makeup and be able to buy those smooth and silky clothes?" Gu Ken sniffed before earnestly nodding in response. Chen Ping'an removed his hand, squatting down and asking, "What's with these 2 pouches of coins? Did you secretly bring them over?" Gu Ken's eyes darted around, and he was just about to make up a story. However, Chen Ping'an was far too familiar with him, so much so that he could immediately see through his thoughts. He directly rewarded Gu Ken with a rap on the head before saying sternly, "Take them back." Gu Ken's stubbornness also showed itself at this moment, and he retorted, "No." An angry expression spread across Chen Ping'an's face. He raised his hand and was just about to give Gu Ken a true smack on the head. However, seeing his extremely stubborn expression, Chen Ping'an couldn't help but feel soft-hearted. He pondered for a moment before softening his voice and asking, "What's going on? Tell me what's happening." Gu Ken recounted the events to him, from beginning to end. While this little child was truly infuriating most of the time, one had to admit that he was indeed very smart and intelligent for his young age. From the old locust tree to the iron lock well, and from the iron lock well to Clay Vase Alley, the little boy clearly described his encounter with the storyteller and how the storyteller had wanted to take him as a disciple. After hearing this, Chen Ping'an felt like he largely understood the situation. Gu Ken was most likely someone who had obtained locust leaves with ancestral blessings. Regardless of whether this was because of fortune rising from the graves of his ancestors or because of the fated opportunities and fortunes that Mr. Chi and Taoist Lu spoke of, It was very likely the case that Gu Kan would be brought out of the small town by that storyteller. However, Chen Ping'an immediately felt anxious and uneasy upon thinking of the river severing true lord. According to Mr. Qi, this person was extremely immoral, and he had more so tried to lead him to his death. He hadn't hesitated to use immortal techniques to create conflict between him and Kai Jinjian. Was it truly a good thing for Gu Kan to become his disciple? On the other hand, however, since this person was willing to take Gu Kan as a disciple, and since he didn't try to kidnap or trick him, nor forcefully buy him, could it be presumed that Gu Kan wouldn't face any life-threatening dangers? The eyes of the mischievous little boy darted around. Seizing the opportunity while Chen Ping'an was still thinking, he suddenly grabbed the 2 pouches of coins from his hands without warning. He then tossed them toward the house before turning around to run away. However, Chen Ping'an's hand shot out and grabbed onto his collar, immediately bringing him to a halt and dragging him back. Gu Kan wrapped his arms around his head, appearing as pitiful as could be. Even though Chen Ping'an had dragged the little boy back, he was still hesitant about how to deal with the situation. This was a matter with great consequence, so Chen Ping'an was extremely afraid of making an incorrect decision and ultimately bringing harm to Gu Kan and his mother. If this matter had only involved himself, the young boy with no one to depend on would have most likely been much more decisive and resolute. The young woman in black had already gotten off the bed at some time, and after arriving at the doorstep she said, "My mother once said that each person has their own fate. Just looking at him, it's clear that this child is a scourge who's destined to wreak havoc for 1,000 years. He's the type of person who will be struck with dumb luck after dumb luck." Gu Kan's eyes lit up at this moment and he hurriedly wiped the 2 lines of snot from his face. He cracked an obsequious smile, revealing his missing baby teeth as he said, "Sister, you're so pretty. You look just like my second sister. This place is too cramped, so why don't you come to my house to chat?" Chen Ping'an said in exasperation, "When did your mother get remarried to your father?" The little boy immediately rolled his eyes after being exposed. He quickly changed his expression and tone, clicking his tongue in wonder and saying, "Chen Ping'an, how impressive. You're finally starting to show some promise. When did you trick a lady back home? Are you going to get married and have guests play pranks on you? However, it's a shame that I won't be able to attend. Otherwise, I would definitely squat in the corner and listen to you 2 wrestling in bed." Chen Ping'an pressed his hand down on Gu Kan's head. He then turned to the woman in black and said apologetically, "This is just what he's like. Don't be angry." The young woman glanced at the little boy and said, "Little brat." Gu Kan was just about to unleash his immense talent, yet he suddenly felt the hand on his head pressing down even harder. He immediately wilted under the pressure, saying in a listless manner, "Sister, you're so beautiful. Of course everything you say is correct." The young woman in black didn't pay any heed to the little boy. Instead, she turned around to face Chen Ping'an, saying in a meaningful voice, "It's best that you accept those 2 pouches of copper coins, lest they become the reason for a falling out in the future. Moreover, once this little boy achieves some success in cultivation in the future, it's extremely likely that his Tao heart will be unstable if you cause him to feel lingering regret and guilt today. That will expose his heart to the claws of demons." These were the words that Gu Kan wanted to hear. He raised a thumb at the young woman and said, "Your hair is long, and you're also long of wit and knowledge." Refe play on the derogatory saying that women have long hair, but are short of wit and knowledge. Ref. Sure enough, you're more reasonable than that young lady from next door. The young woman in black raised an eyebrow, yet she surprisingly accepted this compliment with pleasure. At this moment, an extremely worried yet furious voice roared, "Gu Kan." The little boy became slightly pale and he said, all right, I'm going to leave now, Chen Ping'an. I'm going to leave, okay?" Even though the little boy said this, he didn't realize that he was gripping Chen Ping'an's sleeve even tighter. Perhaps in Gu Kan's subconsciousness, he had already accepted Chen Ping'an as his only close companion apart from his mother since long ago. Chen Ping'an led the little boy out of his courtyard. He squatted down and said in a quiet voice, "Gu Kan, remember to be careful of your master. Also, make sure to look after your mother. You're a responsible man and your mother can only rely on you in the future. Don't make her worry all the time." Gu Kan responded with a nod. Chen Ping'an continued, "Once you arrive outside, remember to do more and speak less. Control your tongue, and so be it if you have to suffer a little because of it. Don't try to always seek an advantage with your tongue. Unlike us, the people outside are far more likely to bear grudges." The little boy's eyes were slightly red as he retorted, "The people here are also very good at bearing grudges. Only you're an exception." Chen Ping'an didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. However, he was indeed rendered speechless. Chen Ping'an suddenly recalled something at this moment, and he asked in a serious voice, "Gu Kan, did you receive a locust leaf?" If he hadn't received one, then Chen Ping'an would be more inclined to believe that Gu Kan hadn't obtained some fated immortal opportunity. Instead, the arrival of that storyteller was perhaps akin to the arrival of the Grim Reaper. The little boy immediately started to feel angry upon hearing this. With a whoosh, he grabbed a large handful of locust leaves from his pocket and cursed out of habit. "I don't know which cursed bastard did this. They secretly stuffed all of these crappy leaves in my pockets, and I only just discovered this when I tried to put the 2 pouches in my pockets after sneaking away from home. If it wasn't Fatty Zhao, then it must have been that little girl Liu Mei. If my mother finds all these leaves when washing my clothes, won't I be scolded and called a headache again? Those 2 are lucky that I'm about to leave soon. Otherwise, I'll certainly toss stones into their latrine in secret." The little boy was on a roll as he continued to curse in anger. Chen Ping'an was absolutely stunned. After coming to his senses, however, he immediately felt a great sense of relief. Upon seeing the little boy preparing to roughly throw the handful of leaves onto the ground, he hurriedly stepped forward to stop him. His expression was extremely serious as he said, "Gu Kan, take them back and take good care of them. You definitely have to take good care of them. If it's possible, it's best that you keep these locust leaves a secret from even your mother. This is very possibly for her own good." The little boy was baffled, but he still nodded and said, "Okay." Chen Ping'an exhaled a long breath, saying to himself, "I genuinely feel relieved now." Gu Kan suddenly fell forward, and his head heavily clashed together with Chen Ping'an's. He whimpered and said, "Sorry." Chen Ping'an tousled his hair and scolded with a smile, "Silly boy." Gu Kan suddenly whispered something next to his ears. Chen Ping'an immediately faltered. The little boy turned around and ran away, not forgetting to wave his hand and say, "I heard the old man say that he's going to bring Mother and me to a place called Cyan Gorge Island in Lake Shujian. If you wind up in such a sorry state that you don't even have a wife, you can go there to look for me. I'm not boasting, but if it's some average woman like the neighboring Zhai Gui, I'll be able to gift you a dozen of them no problem." Chen Ping'an stood still and nodded in reply. He was feeling a little sad. After all, Gu Kan was much like a younger brother to him. Thus, Chen Ping'an was always willing to cater to Gu Kan's whims. The young boy in straw sandals appeared slightly dazed as he looked at the slowly disappearing figure of the little boy. Life had always treated him. It was as if the people who he cared about would always leave his side no matter what he did. Standing on Clay Vase Alley, Chen Ping'an cracked a grin. The heavens were fairly stingy. The neighboring door was quietly opened, from which emerged the maidservant Zhai Gui. She was slender and graceful, much like a lotus in a lake. "You heard all of Gu Kan's mean words?" Chen Ping'an asked. She blinked her beautiful eyes and replied, "I'll pretend that I didn't hear anything. In any case, there's no way I can win an argument against that mother and son." Chen Ping'an felt slightly awkward. In the end, he could only put in some good words for that little brat Gu Kan, saying, "In reality, he doesn't have any bad intentions. It's just that his words are a little crude and jarring." Jai Gui wore an emotionless smile, saying, "I have no clue whether Gu Kan's intentions are good or bad. However, his widowed mother is definitely no easy person to deal with. I'm very certain of this." Chen Ping'an didn't know how to respond. Thus, he could only employ the same tactic that he had only just learned from her, pretend that he hadn't heard anything. Jai Gui suddenly asked a mystifying question. "Chen Ping'an, you truly don't feel any regret?" Chen Ping'an was stumped. What? It didn't look like he was playing dumb and acting. Jai Gui sighed before going back inside and shutting the wooden door. Chen Ping'an had remained standing on Clay Vase Alley this entire time, and with his extremely good eyesight, he was finally able to see the door of Gu Kan's house opening. 3 people walked out, with the mother wearing a large backpack and her son, a small one. They slowly walked toward the other end of Clay Vase Alley. In fact, Chen Ping'an clearly saw the storyteller turning around to glance at him, a playful smile on his face. Only when the 3 figures vanished into the distance did Chen Ping'an return inside. It was also at this moment that he found that Enning Yao was already able to sit on the doorstep by herself. Was her body forged from steel? Chen Ping'an placed the jade hairpin that Mr. Qi had given him and the 2 pouches of copper coins on the table. He then started to boil water and brew medicine, his actions showing off his wealth of experience. He appeared nothing like a potter at this moment, and he instead appeared like someone who had worked in a pharmacy for many years. Enning Yao felt slightly puzzled, but she didn't open her mouth to ask. She was extremely bored right now, so she walked over to the table. After pondering for a moment, she retrieved the pouch of coins that Chen Ping'an had hidden in the vase. She sat down, and there were now 3 pouches of coins and a jade hairpin on the table before her. Of course, there was also the sword that was obediently cowering in the corner. Chen Ping'an didn't stop her from retrieving the pouch of coins. He simply warned her, "Mr. Qi gave that jade hairpin to me, so be careful with it." Perhaps afraid that the young woman wouldn't take his warning seriously, Chen Ping'an timidly warned again, "You really do have to be careful." The young woman rolled her eyes. 3 pouches of gold essence copper coins. Coincidentally, there was 1 pouch of greeting spring coins, 1 pouch of offering coins, and 1 pouch of good fortune coins. All 3 types of coins were present. The young woman rested her chin in one hand as she reached over to play around with 3 coins with her other. "How did everything go? Are you able to tell me?" she casually asked. Chen Ping'an kept a careful eye on the flames as he squatted next to the wall near the window. Occasionally, he would also flip through the 3 sheets of prescription. Upon hearing Enning Yao's question, he replied, "Is it appropriate to tell?" The young woman furrowed her brows. "You're already stuck in such a miserable state, yet you're still afraid that I might be silenced and killed after hearing your secrets. Chen Ping'an, I'm not trying to belittle or discourage you, but I truly encourage a foolishly kind person like you to never leave this small town. Otherwise, you won't even know how you got killed." The young woman was expressing great pity for his misfortune, yet she was also expressing deep annoyance at his lack of fight. Even if this stubborn and inflexible youth were an Arhat, heavenly lord, and sword immortal all at once, he would still face certain death within a year once he left this small town and was tossed into her hometown. Not even his corpse would remain. The young boy in straw sandals chuckled and said, "Then I'll tell you." Enning Yao placed 3 slender fingers on 3 separate copper coins, dragging them around the table. "Do whatever you want." Chen Ping'an recounted the events before Mr. Qi's arrival. As for the events after Mr. Qi's arrival, he picked and chose what he told her. After listening to his recollection, the young woman calmly said, "That river-severing true Lord Liu Jimao was clearly the culprit behind everything. However, It's not like Kai Jinjian and Fu Nanhua were good people either. If it weren't for Mr. Chi's help, you would have had no hope of escaping from the clutches of the three forces in the future, regardless of how far you fled. To put it bluntly, killing you is truly an easy task. If we weren't in this small town, to say nothing of Liu Jimao, even that woman from Dawn Cloud Mountain would be able to crush your body and soul with a single finger. Chen Ping'an nodded and murmured, I know. You don't know squat, Enning Yao huffed angrily. Chen Ping'an didn't deny this, and he continued to brew the medicine. It's all because of that loach that you're facing this calamity. Why didn't you tell that little boy the truth? She asked. Chen Ping'an didn't remain silent this time, nor did he turn around to look at her. He sat down on a small stool and looked at the jumping red flames as he quietly replied, doing that wouldn't be right. Enning Yao wanted to say something, but she hesitated for a moment before eventually looking at the back of the skinny young boy. She sighed with emotion and said, Then do you know? If your fists aren't strong enough, no one will care whether you're right or wrong. The young boy shook his head. Regardless of whether they want to listen to it or not, the truth of the matter won't change. As if unsure of himself, he turned around and asked with a smile, Right. Enning Yao glared back at him. Right in your dreams. Chen Ping'an huffed and turned back around, continuing to brew the medicine. The young woman in black, the outsider called Enning Yao, picked up the jade hairpin and carefully observed it. She quickly discovered a small line of characters inscribed upon it. She glanced at Chen Ping'an. Even though she only had a rough understanding of calligraphy, she still felt that the characters inscribed on the jade hairpin were extremely beautiful and moving. As gentle and amiable as jade should a virtuous person be, like threading a needle, brewing medicine was also a delicate task. Chen Ping'an was very calm and methodical as he focused on the pot of medicine before him. A mysterious sense of happiness radiated from his body. However, Enning Yao wasn't a patient person. Apart from practicing sword techniques and saber techniques, there weren't many other things that interested her. She had left home at a young age, traveling all over the lands by herself. As a result, she often had to live in very rough environments. However, it was also because of this that she wasn't feeling any sense of discomfort in the bare and destitute house of the young boy. After all, she was already accustomed to camping out in the open and trekking through the wind and rain. Regardless of how particular a person once was, such experiences would eventually cause them to become much less so. Is your left hand okay now? Enning Yao asked. Chen Ping'an's left hand was wrapped in strips of cotton cloth as he carried a bowl of medicine over. After Enning Yao accepted it, he smiled and replied, It's fine. I ground up some herbal medicines before I came back, and I've already applied the paste to my wound. When I suffered cuts and bruises while working as a potter, I also used this paste to treat my wounds. It worked 100% of the time. In fact, an old man from the Yang family's medicine shop told me this secret recipe a long time ago. However, I promised him that I wouldn't secret recipe with others. Otherwise, seeing that you always travel around, it's quite likely that you might find it useful. If you want a copy, I can look for that old man and ask him for permission. However, I was in quite a hurry when I went to the medicine shop today, so I wasn't able to see the old man. Hopefully, he was only gone for a short while. As the young woman drank her medicine, her eyebrows that were as slender as blades knitted into a slight frown. However, she still finished drinking the medicine without any complaints. After returning the bowl to the waiting young boy, she mumbled, Kind-hearted fool. No wonder you're so absurdly poor. It's almost as if you deserve to be bullied. Before Chen Ping'an could respond, Enning Yao added, Don't mind me. I'm quite frank when I speak. However, Enning Yao didn't know that this explanation was even more hurtful than her initial words. Chen Ping'an wanted to say something, but he couldn't help but hesitate. Enning Yao wiped away the medicine stains from the corners of her mouth before sitting up straight and saying in a serious voice, "Even though the sage who's looking over this place, the person whom you refer to as Mr. Chi from the private school, wants to help you resolve this matter and allow you to live in peace, you have to realize that everyone has a limit to their abilities. This is true even for sages. This is not to mention that Mr. Chi's situation is also quite dire at this moment, and he's showing signs of being like a clay Buddha who can barely cross a river. I'm afraid that he might not be able to ensure your safety in the future. Meanwhile, Enning Yao, am an outsider, and I'm someone who reciprocates a drop of kindness with a spring of goodwill. If someone glares at me, however, I'll also reciprocate their hostility with ferocity and vengeance. Reciprocating a drop of kindness with a spring of goodwill, reciprocating hostility with ferocity and vengeance. A clay Buddha who can barely cross a river. Right now, Enning Yao was secretly filled with a sense of pride. Just listen to her words. Weren't they filled with knowledge and culture? However, it was a pity that Chen Pingin's neighbor was quite a well-read student. Song Jixin would recite the teachings of the sages almost every morning and every night, and according to him, this was a process of nourishing his noble spirit. Thus, even though Chen Pingin had never read these books before, he had at the very least heard them being recited. As such, he wasn't unfamiliar with the philosophy of these students and scholars. Even when it came to deep and profound phrases, he could still roughly guess their meaning based on the context of the words that came before and after. Enning Yao stared intently at Chen Pingin, hoping to find a hint of astonishment, admiration, or confusion on his face. To her dismay, however, Chen Pingin's expression was a punchable one that seemingly said, "I understand, please continue." The young woman was extremely disheartened. Her high spirits and vigor receded like a tide, and she huffed. "What I'm trying to say is, since you saved my life, I'll naturally help you kill Old Dragon City's Fu Nanhua in the future, or Lake Shujian's Liu Jimao. If you want to kill both of them to completely eliminate all future threats, however, you'll have to offer some money to do away with the misfortune. After all, the two of us are nothing more than strangers who came together by chance. In other words, you need to pay me with a pouch of copper coins." The young woman quickly pointed at the bag of greeting spring coins and said, "For example, this pouch is quite to my liking. The patterns of the offering coins and good fortune coins don't look very good, and their makes don't suit my taste either." Enning Yao slightly tilted her chin and continued, "If you're willing to throw in the two other pouches of copper coins in addition to this, I can help you deal with Old Dragon City and Dawn Cloud Mountain as well. Of course, you can forget about all of this if I die at the hands of Liu Jimao. After all, my cultivation base is low, and I've only just reached the 6th tier of the 9 tiers of martial arts. As a martial artist, my physique is still yet to reach an accomplished state. As for the 15 tiers of cultivation, I've more so only reached the Dragon Gate tier of the middle 5 tiers. I have 6 patterns in my vital organs, but I've still yet to add the final touch to bring them to life." Chen Pingin was truly dumbfounded this time. He had no idea what she was talking about. The young woman felt slightly ashamed and angry. She had always felt a sense of embarrassment and humiliation at her lowly cultivation base, yet Chen Pingin's dazed expression was as if he were saying, "Miss, please explain this to me." This undoubtedly jabbed her where it hurt. Upon seeing her dark expression, Chen Pingin immediately realized the gravity of the situation. He hurriedly said, "Enning Yao, your wounds were so severe just a moment ago, so why does it look like you're mostly healed already?" The young woman lowered her gaze a little as she wrapped her arms around her chest and said in a hoarse voice, "I was genuinely almost about to die at that time. If Taoist Lu hadn't saved me, I would have. Anyhow, I owe you a huge favor, so I more so shouldn't try to take advantage of you while you're in such a difficult situation. I shouldn't have asked for those 3 pouches of copper coins. How can my life be compared to the likes of Liu Jimao and the others? So, I was the one who was wrong." Pretend that I didn't say anything just then. After I leave this small town, I'll try my best to deal with those threats for you. However, let me say this first. I only do what's within my abilities, and I won't sacrifice myself if I know I definitely can't succeed." The young woman was feeling extremely downcast at this moment. Perhaps this was because she rarely ever lowered her head and apologized to others. "Which pouch of coins is the offering coins?" Chen Ping'an asked. Enning Yao pointed at the pouch that was decorated with gold patterns. Chen Ping'an took out 3 copper coins and held them in his hand. He then used his arm to push the 3 pouches of copper coins toward the young woman, saying with a smile, "Here, take these." Enning Yao was astounded. After a long while, she finally came to her senses and asked, "Chen Ping'an, were you dropped on your head as a child?" "No," Chen Ping'an replied in exasperation. "However, I was often whipped in the head by cow tails when I helped others herd cattle." Enning Yao suddenly flared up in rage, slamming the table and interrogating, "Perhaps you have feelings for me?" Chen Ping'an was completely stupefied. The young woman cracked a grin, raising her thumbs at Chen Ping'an and saying, "You have very good taste." She then twisted her thumb and pointed at herself, saying with a buoyant expression, "However, I obviously won't agree. The man who I like will definitely be the most powerful sword immortal in the world. The most powerful in the entire world. A great sword immortal, the Tao ancestor and Buddha, the paramount Confucius. Standing before his sword, they'll have no option but to lower their heads and stand aside." Chen Ping'an was beet red at this moment. He scratched his head and said, "Enning Yao, I think you misunderstood. I never said I liked you." Enning Yao raised an eyebrow. She pondered for a moment before leaning forward and squinting an eye, raising her hand and bringing her index finger and thumb an inch apart. "Not even this much?" she asked in a diffident voice. Chen Ping'an was firm and resolute as he replied, "No, please be at ease." Enning Yao heaved a heavy sigh as she retracted her hand, saying in a sympathetic voice, "Chen Ping'an, even if you're fortunate enough to find yourself a wife in the future, she'll most likely be a scatterbrained person." Chen Ping'an sat down opposite to her, smiling happily as he said, "I'll be happy as long as she's a good person." Enning Yao didn't offer a comment on this. Some people meandered about and waited for death, while others would be satisfied as long as they were slightly well off. Meanwhile, there were also those who were extremely driven and would soar to unfathomable heights. Just like her mother had said, different people would have different destinies and fates. There was not necessarily a superior or inferior fate. However, her father had different views on this matter. While one should not try to forcefully obtain that which was not fated, this did not then imply that they shouldn't strive to obtain it at all. A person still needed to maintain their ambition. If they still failed to obtain that which they desired, then that would be a different conversation altogether. Of course, her father didn't dare to utter these words before her mother. "Enning Yao, have you also come to our small town to seek a fated opportunity?" Chen Ping'an casually asked. The young woman didn't try to conceal anything, replying, "I was only able to obtain a position to enter this small town after exhausting all of my savings and using up a favor. However, I'm not like the others. I'm not looking for a fated opportunity or whatever, and I simply want to ask someone to forge a sword for me. It'll be best if it's a sword that resonates with my ideals. As for whether it's sharp or not, and as for whether it can carry a boundless sword chi or not, all of these are secondary." "Forge a sword?" Chen Ping'an asked in puzzlement. "Yes, I want to ask the blacksmith master Yuan to forge a sword for me. He's got quite a reputation in this small town, and he's also got an ironclad rule that he never breaks. That is, he'll only forge one sword every 30 years. In fact, he was only willing to come here to replace Qi Jingchun because he felt like the environment here was extremely suitable for forging a sword. I want to try my luck and see whether he's willing to forge a sword for me. If it truly doesn't work out, it's not like there's anything I can do about it either," I can only treat it as bad luck. Chen Ping'an smiled and said, good people will always be blessed with good karma. I genuinely don't know how to respond, Ening Yao said without strength. She then glanced at the young boy and asked, your left hand doesn't hurt anymore. Chen Ping'an faltered upon hearing this. It does hurt. Then why don't you look like you're in pain? She asked in a skeptical voice. Even if I roll around and scream, my pain won't go away, will it? Chen Ping'an responded as a matter of fact. Ening Yao slapped her forehead. I truly don't know how to deal with you. You're just like my dad. However, you're far, far weaker than him. Chen Ping'an replied with a smile, staying silent as he gazed at the courtyard in front of his house. Ening Yao pushed the 3 bags of copper coins back toward him, saying, I don't want them. Chen Ping'an dragged his gaze back over, saying softly, Ening Yao, have you considered that it might be a bad thing for me to keep them? After seeing Mr. Qi, I'm even more certain of this. Ening Yao wasn't the type of person who would easily change her decision. She shook her head and said, that's something for you to worry about. It's got nothing to do with me. I've already made up my mind. I'll definitely repay you for saving my life in the future. I definitely won't repay you in a half-hearted way either. I have to live up to my name and reputation. However, you have to look after yourself in the meantime as well. Don't go dying by yourself by accident. As long as you can make it through this period. The agreeable young boy interrupted her for the first time, saying, Ening Yao, it was Taoist Lu who saved you, so you don't need to feel like you owe me anything. If I hadn't thought that I was going to die at the time, and if I hadn't wanted to ask Taoist Lu to do a little something for my parents, I definitely wouldn't have opened the door. The young woman humphed and said, that's your own problem. The young boy smiled and repeated her retort, well, that's your own problem then. They both glared at each other. It was surprisingly Ening Yao who backed down first, and she said with a headache, suppose you really do like me, but I genuinely can't accept your feelings. Chen Ping'an put his head in his hands. Against such a stubborn and strange girl, he truly didn't know what to do. At this moment, someone climbed over the wall and entered the courtyard. There was no need to guess who this was, only Liu Xianyang would do such a thing. He ran over to the door and was just about to call out, yet he suddenly swallowed his words as if he were being choked. Chen Ping'an hurriedly stood up and walked next to Liu Xianyang, whispering, can I stay over at your place for the next 2 days? This young woman is going to be staying at my house. Liu Xianyang pushed Chen Ping'an's head aside. He then rubbed his hands like a fly rubbing its legs, saying in a considerate voice, young lady, my house is bigger, and it's also got more necessities. If you don't mind, why don't you stay over at my place? I do mind, the young woman said, her back facing them. Liu Xianyang grimaced upon hearing this. Looking at the slender figure and her saber, he continued to persist, saying, young lady, you might not know, but I was just being blocked by 2 people over at the covered bridge just then. They were sobbing and begging me to sell my ancestral treasures to them. Even so, I still refused. However, I was still screwed over by them, and I was almost scolded to death by Master Yuan. By the looks of it. You're also an outsider who's come here to try your luck. Even though I might not necessarily sell those treasures to you, it's certainly no problem for me to show them to you and allow you to broaden your horizons. No need, Ening Yao replied, her voice still cold. Liu Xianyang sat down in Chen Ping'an's original spot. His eyes lit up when he saw the young woman's appearance, and he said, young lady, why so cold? Chen Ping'an and I can squeeze ourselves into this shabby house. You can go over to my larger house, and you certainly won't feel limited in there. You won't feel like there's not even space to place your hands and feet. Ening Yao's expression became stern as she replied, thanks for the goodwill. You can go away and play by yourself now. Liu Xianyang didn't feel awkward at all. Instead, he stood up and said, I understand. Be it a golden hut or a silver hut, none of them can compare to one's own grass hut. Understood, understood. Liu Xianyang dragged Chen Ping'an to the door, elbowing him and asking, "What's going on?" "It's hard to explain in just a few words. Just tell me, can I stay over at your place or not?" Chen Ping'an replied. Liu Xianyang rolled his eyes. "Of course you can. However, you have to promise me that you'll keep an eye on Zhai Gui for me. You definitely can't let that brat Song Jixin forcefully defile her. You have to protect the chastity of my future wife." "In your dreams," Chen Ping'an replied without hesitation. Liu Xianyang patted Chen Ping'an's shoulder and said in a meaningful voice, "I'll take that as a yes." The young woman in black suddenly turned around, saying, "Do you know that you have a natural aptitude for swordsmanship? The porcelain buyers most likely didn't take you out of the small town when you were 9 because they wanted you to absorb more of the spiritual energy of this place. They made the correct decision. So, when you're working with Master Ryuan, you definitely have to seize the opportunity to become his disciple. Remember, you have to at least become an in-house disciple, and it's best if you can become a direct disciple. As for anything greater than that, there's no need for you to dream so far. Your physique and aptitude still haven't reached such a phenomenal level yet." Liu Xianyang smiled and nodded earnestly, agreeing with what the young woman said. He then turned around to face Chen Ping'an, pointing at Enning Yao before pointing at his own head. "She's telling the truth. Don't disregard it," Chen Ping'an said. Liu Xianyang became solemn and he said in a quiet voice, "I feel like something's not quite right." Guess who was leading the two groups of people at the covered bridge just then? It was Lu Zhengchun, that little bastard from Fortune Street. What ill intentions is he harboring? It's not like I'm money-hungry or anything, so why should I do business with them? Moreover, that suit of armor is an ancient treasure passed down by my ancestors. If I sell it, won't I be scolded to death by my grandfather when I see him in my dreams?" Chen Ping'an's expression was as if he were facing a great enemy. "You have to be careful. Lu Zhengchun and those outsiders aren't to be trifled with." He then turned around and asked, "Enning Yao, do you know about their backgrounds?" The young woman in black nodded, replying, "The old man and the little girl are from Sun-Scorched Mountain, which can be regarded as a well-established and reputable sect in the Eastern Treasured Vile continent. The old man isn't human, and to put it simply, he's 100 times more powerful than either Fu Nanhua or Kai Jinjian. The woman and her son aren't pushovers either. In fact, those who can enter the small town in groups of 2 are naturally more than just a little bit wealthy. The woman is extremely shrewd and calculating, and the little boy doesn't seem like a good-hearted person either. So, I encourage your friend to become Master Ryuan's disciple as soon as possible. That will essentially be the same as obtaining a life-saving talisman. In this small town, regardless of how powerful one's background or supporter, they wouldn't dare to provoke or challenge a sage. Are you confident that you can become Master Ryuan's disciple?" Chen Ping'an turned to Liu Xianyang and asked. Liu Xianyang was slightly unsure, and he slowly muttered, "On the first day I went to work as an apprentice, Master Ryuan was looking at me with the same expression that old man Yao always used to wear. He probably wanted to observe me for some time before making a decision on whether he wanted to take me as a disciple or not. It's just that." Chen Ping'an gave him a ferocious glare. Liu Xianyang wore a self-ridiculing smile as he continued, "It's just that Master Ryuan's darling daughter has far too great of an appetite. I was absolutely astounded by her, so I made a few small jokes. Who knew that she would be so powerful and domineering when wielding a blacksmith hammer in the forge, yet so timid and shy during other times? How was I meant to know that she couldn't take a joke? I made her cry at that time, and unfortunately for me, this was all caught by her father. The way that he looked at me instantly became strange. There's no way I can become his disciple now. In any case, I never planned to become anyone's slave or disciple. Dealing with old man Yao's strange temper was already more than enough for me. Was I not just working at the blacksmith to put food on the table?" Chen Ping'an looked up with a dark expression. Liu Xianyang, who was half a head taller than Chen Ping'an, lowered his head, not daring to look at the young boy in straw sandals. Enning Yao was slightly confused by this sight. This was also the first time that she had seen him become genuinely angry. Did any locust leaves mysteriously appear on you when you passed by the old locust tree? Chen Ping'an asked in a low voice. Liu Xianyang shook his head, replying, "Nope. However, the Taoist fortune teller who likes to perv on women said some ill-omened things to me. I almost smashed his stall when I heard it." Chen Ping'an's expression changed slightly. He frowned before turning around and asking, "Enning Yao, will 3 pouches of gold essence copper coins suffice as payment? Also, will this be too troublesome for you? Please tell me the truth." Enning Yao pondered this carefully before replying, "It is quite a hassle, but it won't be too much trouble. However, you guys still have to be especially careful in these next 2 days. Tell your friend not to run around everywhere. After all, my situation isn't too good right now." She paused for a brief moment before adding, 2 bags of coins for 2 groups of people, and another bag of coins for Master Yuan to take your friend as a disciple. To put it simply, I'll take a bag of coins for each task that I accomplish. Rest assured, since I've agreed to this, it means that I'm confident that I can earn at least 2 bags of coins. Chen Ping'an ran inside the house, hurriedly pushing the 3 bags of coins toward the young woman. "Take them." Enning Yao wasn't a hesitant person, so she didn't refuse Chen Ping'an's offer this time, accepting 2 bags of copper coins. She wore a fake smile as she said, "Many people in the world try to stuff as much money as they can into their pockets. Yet, there are also people like you who enjoy tossing money at others." The young boy didn't rebut her. Instead, he nodded and said with a smile, "Money is indeed very important. Very, very important." Liu Xianyang, who had been kept in the dark this entire time, frantically exclaimed, "Chen Ping'an, have you gone mad? Why are you giving the coins to her? That's 2 entire bags of copper coins. Just how long would they last you?" "It's my money, so what are you going to do about it?" Chen Ping'an huffed. "Isn't your money also my money?" Liu Xianyang said with righteousness. "Just think about it. If I borrowed money from you, would you have the heart to demand me to pay it back?" Chen Ping'an was rendered speechless. He fell deep into thought. At this moment, Liu Xianyang also realized that he had interrupted at an untimely moment. He immediately shut up. The atmosphere in the house became a little heavy. Chen Ping'an opened his mouth, saying, "Enning Yao, this genuinely won't cause you to." The young woman glanced at the sword in the white scabbard before nodding and replying, "There's no problem." Afterward, she couldn't help but add, "Worrying about this and worrying about that, don't you find yourself annoying? And you still say that you're not a foolishly kind person." Chen Ping'an replied with a smile. Liu Xianyang pondered for a moment before choosing to remain silent. In the end, the tall and broad young man chose to keep his words to himself, thinking to himself that Enning Yao had never seen the other side of Chen Ping'an before. It was very rare that Chen Ping'an wouldn't be agreeable and kind. However, when that happened, Chen Ping'an would truly become very difficult to speak to. Liu Xianyang had witnessed it before. Chen Ping'an's neighbor Song Jixin had most likely witnessed it before as well.